But despite the uncertain environment occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2021 edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair IATF held in Durban-South Africa came to a successful close, bringing together business leaders, senior officials, and 7 sitting head of states under one roof with the aim of boosting trade and investment in the continent. The 7-day fair, which was organized by the African Export-Import Bank, that's Afri-Exim Bank, in collaboration with the African Union and the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat under the theme, Building Bridges for a Successful AfCFTA, is no doubt the biggest Pan-African business event to take place since the pandemic began. According to the recently released tally by the IATF Advisory Council, Nigeria and other African countries sealed trade deals worth $42.1 billion, surpassing the preset target of $40 billion in trade and investment deals, going well beyond the $32 billion talking about transactions closed during the first edition in Cairo, Egypt in 2018. This successful feat, however, goes a long way to show that the AfCFTA, which is less than a year, is in the process of advancing the massive trade potential in Nigeria and the African continent. Well, to discuss more on this, I have joining me virtually. He is the Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadiri, MNI. Good afternoon. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, DG, we were together in Durban, IATF, and I want to start by asking you this question. Why do you think that African leaders are kind of speaking with one voice at this time? They really want to come together and just, form a common front and trade together and do business together. What was happening all the while? Why are they just waking up at this time?
Well, thank you once again. I think the African leaders have realized that acting individually and not trading amongst ourselves was putting us far behind in terms of the international trade ecosystem. We have been disadvantaged by our colonial experience, where deliberately the African economies were created to just feed the industrialized countries of Europe and America. So in order for us to be able to develop and to be able to gain entrance into international trade, we needed a platform that will unite us so that first we'll trade among ourselves, and then we'll be able to arrive at a synergy and cooperation that will allow us to make the move at the international scene. What you are seeing now was something that should have happened long before now. And it's not that we have not tried, but what is unique about this one is the fact that there's a unanimity of opinion concerning the fact that recent events all over the world has shown that except you help yourself, nobody is going to help you. And so the African leaders have gathered and they have created this continental free trade area. And the IATF is a right move to show that they are serious about it. I think if you are there, you saw the mood of all the African leaders that were there, and we saw that the agenda was clear. This time around, what is also unique and which is is pleasurable to me is the fact that the private sector is being mainstreamed into the process because government does not do business. And so the private sector has been brought in and we are working side by side with governments. I think that's what has really made the difference.
And now staying with the AfCFTA, the theme also says it's aimed at building bridges for a successful implementation of the AfCFTA. So is it like, let me ask it this way, that all is now well with the AfCFTA, all we need to do is just build the bridges? What more needs to be done for proper implementation of this agreement?
Yeah, what is critical is building the bridges. Because even though we were close apart, we were closely related in terms of proximity of borders and the rest, we were acting in different directions. We were trading more with countries outside of Africa, and less than 13% of the trade, 13 or 15% of our trading was done within and amongst ourselves. So building the bridges is a first major step, and I think that is a reasonable objective to achieve. Going forward, we can now live together. Before now, we were still tied to the aprons of our colonial masters. And so there is need for us to remove those obstacles that have made it impossible for us, or made it difficult or too expensive for us to relate and trade amongst ourselves. The IATFs and other initiatives under the AFCFTA is meant to break down those barriers, be it tariff, be it non-tariff barriers that have made it not to be economically viable for us to relate amongst ourselves. So my answer would be that yes, it is important to build the bridges, but beyond that, we also have to create vehicles that will move on that bridge that we have created. And it behooves the various leaders from the African countries to ensure that we do not close the door against ourselves after building bridges to link our borders.
Can we also look at the impact of this as countries start to bounce back from the impact of COVID-19? Well, Omicron is also there now, and a lot of restrictions and all of that already on the ground, which I know you also like to talk about. But do you see this as the IATF as another way to bounce back from the effects of COVID-19?
Very well. I mean, and the IATF has shown that COVID-19 is not limiting Africa. Thank God the predictions of majorly the West that we are going to see people falling and dying on the street didn't happen. And I don't know whether science has been able to explain why that is not happening, but we thank God that it's happening. And so we have shown that if more than 11,000 persons are gathered physically in Durban, and if we recorded presence of 59 countries, 46 being African countries, if we had more than 500 deals being negotiated, if we exceeded last year's performance in terms of deals by $10 billion, it shows that we are not daunted by the advent of COVID-19. So be it Omicron, be it Delta, be it whatever it is, I think what is essential is that life must go on, business must go on, and in fact, COVID-19 can also usher in a new line of business. I mean, that is why, for instance, PAMA, the Pan-African Manufacturers Association, is which we are leading, is collaborating with the Coalition for Dialogue on Africa, which is comprised of eminent Africans, to develop a strategy for producing COVID-19 vaccines and other vaccines that may be needed for will-be diseases, because they will soon come, to be produced in Africa. So I think apart from riding above the limitations of COVID-19 pandemic and all the lockdowns and the rest, we're actually going to get business out of it in terms of manufacturing what we need, so that we can counter the what the UN Secretary General himself has described as a vaccine appetite all over the world. So I think whichever way you look at it, Africa is rising above it, and we are taking it in our strides.
Now, like you said, deals worth more than 40 billion, precisely 42.1 billion is what we hear has been signed and all of that. Now, looking at unlocking Africa's potentials now, DG, manufacturers have a major role to play in this. You've talked about the Pan-African thing, which I also witnessed the discussions that very day. Tell us, what are you manufacturers doing across board to also fall in line with what is on ground?
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting one. I think, like we said when we were giving birth to PAMA, individually, African manufacturers may not be able to break into the international trade system, because in the first instance, it has been skewed against us, to the extent that even within Africa, we are not able to trade goods that are made in Africa. So with PAMA, the first major objective in terms of trade, and since we are talking about trade, is that we want to be able to build value chains of the products manufactured here across borders. So it is possible for us to rely on raw materials that are sourced within Africa and facilitated by the 90% reduction to zero of our tariff, to ensure that those raw materials move from one country to the other, rather than being imported from outside of the country. This, apart from upskilling the skill, it will improve contribution of manufacturing sector to GDP, it will create jobs, it will alleviate poverty, and it will ensure that we are able to indigenize technology. That way, we can have business partners across the borders. In the first instance, those border lines were artificially drawn, and we are not even party to it. So essentially, what we are doing is breaking down the borders, ensuring integration among African people. The best way for you to integrate is economy. In any case, a political integration in Africa has proven to be very, very difficult. But economic integration is the easiest. You have private sector people coming together. I mean, I visited more than 30, the distance of more than 30 countries. And you needed to see how manufacturers from Malawi, from South Africa, from Kenya were relating with us as if we've known for a very long time. And people are able to agree, exchange cards, and start making calls. Some of the exhibitors we took to Durban were even going into industrial areas in Durban to look at the factories and to agree on what products would be needed and what kind of collaboration we could have. So that is what PAMA is all about. Our members are beginning to talk among each other. In fact, we've had 3 visitors visiting some of our members that met in Durban. So that is the idea. That is what PAMA principally wants to achieve. Apart from the fact that we want to be able to sit at the table when the African leaders are discussing trade, they are discussing things that will affect our business. We want to have a seat at the African Union, so that when the heads of states are going to sign agreements, or they are going to decide on how to remove the binding constraints that have limited our exchanges in Africa, we'll be at the table to be able to offer advice and to be able to contribute. Meanwhile, this was even anticipated in AfCFTA, that the private sector to be mainstreamed into the process of negotiations and discussions on how to overcome the challenges that AfCFTA seeks to overcome.
DG, well said, but let's now look at issues around ease of doing business, security, infrastructure, of course, access to market. What are you getting? What are the feelers? What feelers are you getting from members? How easy do you think this will be, or seamless do you think this would happen?
Yeah, we have our challenges, and those ones you have mentioned rank chief among them. We still have the challenge of, well, when you say ease of doing business, the cost of doing business is now rising to the surface, even though we have achieved some mileage in terms of reducing the burden of starting the business. But the critical task of continuing with the business remains in Nigeria. The cost of doing business is still high. We also have infrastructure challenges. Look at the ports, for instance. And the port is significantly important to import and export. So if you are not getting that right, it remains a challenge. Again, the issues of multiplicity of taxes and levies, our members are groaning literally under this burden. But you see, almost all African countries have this kind of challenge, but we are all dealing with it. But in Nigeria, we have no business still allowing those challenges to confront us. And there are things that we need to resolve quickly. Otherwise, 200 million people market is a delight for manufacturers outside of Nigeria within the African countries. They will simply just take advantage of AfCFTA and overrun us. So we are working with government, and I think that the Action Committee on the AFCFTA should actually now wake up, having seen what happened in Durban and how the private sector and public sector of each countries are collaborating, exhibiting together, having dialogue, governments even having dialogue with private sector on behalf of their companies. So I think this should be, the IATF should be an eye-opener that will make the Nigerian government to listen to the well-known challenges that we are having. Power remains a challenge, the transportation remains a challenge, the port issue remains a challenge, access to forex to import raw materials and spares that are not locally available remains a challenge. But we, like I said, are in constant engagement with government to be able to resolve some of these issues, because we are lucky we had almost a one-year break. AFCFTA implementation started from 1st of January, but up to now, no meaningful trade has taken place. So we've had a moratorium, so to say, of 1 year, which should have allowed us to be able to address those challenges.
Wrapping up this now, DG, we see development financial institutions also playing a role in all of this, the likes of Afri-Exim, Nexim, even the BOI, and all of them, we saw them playing actively in all of this. What sort of support do you think manufacturers need from these development finance institutions, and what's your outlook as we move on in 2022?
Yes, thank you very much. We are already in talks with Afri-Exim Bank and the African Development Bank as well. You know that the president of the African Development Bank was our distinguished guest speaker at our 50th anniversary and 49th AGM, and we had an opportunity to discuss with his aides, and we are currently now arriving at processes where we could have direct support for our members. Afri-Exim Bank is facilitating payment system, and I think that is very important for trade within the African continent. We also have Nexim Bank, we have BOI. Like you know, BOI made a good showing by displaying what is Nigerian to the African world, and I think we give them a lot of credit, and NEPC as well. So we are cooperating and collaborating with these agencies. And I think that they are primed to ensure that we have a beneficial engagement in the AFCA. But we must know that government is the ultimate decider of the level of success you can make in any economy. The private sector of the country cannot rise above the determination of government. There are so many things that are outside of the decisions that you can take at boardrooms and on the factory floors. There has to be an environment that is conducive for business. So in relating with these African international organizations within the African continent, we will need the buy-in of our country, because most of these agreements have to be signed off by the Nigerian government to ensure that they are done in good faith and all of that. So we must look forward to the active support of government, even though the mandates of these organizations have made it robust enough for us to be able to have direct exchanges with them. So I think on the look of it, Nigeria remains an attraction to all of them, because we had very useful discussions with them, and we are concluding by setting up committees from both organizations and private sector operators to be able to facilitate the process. I will look at year 2022 as the year that we should put into use all the preparations we have made, even before the commencement of trading under AFCFTA from January 1. We need to now move to take on Africa. In the 2022 budget, we are seeing some moves about resolving some of the infrastructure challenges that we have. We look forward to active involvement of the African Action Committee on the AFCFTA that should be able to rally other ministry departments and agencies of government to overcome those binding constraints that our studies have shown. The manufacturing work stream in that organ is already putting in place interactions with government agencies, and even external organizations to be able to mainstream our participation and be able to get the support that we require. So on the look of it, I'm optimistic about the years ahead, and we know that our members are better informed now about what AFCFTA is all about and what is needed across Africa.
I must thank you so much for your time, DG Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. There, Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadiri, MNI. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. We really appreciate this. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.